Well, hello there. Welcome to Critical Weight Theory, where we dive into history, culture, and stories that shape our world. So, I'm Wade, and today we're exploring a powerful and deeply personal documentary titled I Heard It Through the Grapevine, released in 1982, back when I was, I guess, 1 years old, or 1 year old. Maybe this was even released before I was one, but anyway, it was directed by Dick Fontaine and Pat Hartley. This film follows the legendary writer and activist James Baldwin as he retraces the steps of the civil rights movement and confronts the progress, or lack thereof, since the 1960s. And that, of course, makes this a pretty relevant story for today. James Baldwin's reflection on civil rights is sober and at times somber, but pretty necessary. James Baldwin is one of the most influential voices in American literature and activism. His work, from Go Tell It on the Mountain to The Fire Next Time, has continuously challenged the narratives of race, power, and justice in America. In I Heard It Through the Grapevine, Baldwin embarks on a deeply personal journey across the American South, revisiting the battlegrounds of the civil rights movement and reconnecting with activists who fought for equality. And as the documentary progresses, you get to see some of the harrowing footage of that era. And these are images that, as dark as they are to see unfold on a screen, it's still important that people realize that these things were happening. We live in an age now where, disturbing images are often censored, disturbing words are often censored, and all that kind of stuff, ostensibly to protect people from harm. But really, it's it's sort of debatable to what extent actual harm is being prevented. And in some cases, maybe there's more harm in people not seeing these images because really they were sort of like points to rally around. They would sometimes wake people up from their slumber, so to speak. I mean, people say the word woke disparagingly and all that kind of stuff, but really one of the ways in which people get woke up, or whatever term you care to use, is that they sometimes see or hear the things that they're not supposed to, and it can sort of rattle people and awaken their senses and get them to understand what unjust situations look like, and they will better, in some cases at least, understand what is actually at stake. So, unlike traditional historical documentaries, this film does not merely recount past events. Instead, it presents Baldwin's introspections, weaving together his narration, interviews with civil rights leaders, and, as I mentioned already, historical footage. It's a relatively raw, unfiltered look at racial struggles in America, largely through Baldwin's eyes, although, you know, as mentioned, we do get to get some perspectives from other people as well. And the meaning behind the title is also an interesting fact about this movie, or detail. The documentary's title is inspired, of course, by the famous song I Heard It Through the Grapevine, a phrase that reflects how news and ideas spread within black communities, especially during the times of struggle that were captured by that song itself. Just as enslaved people and civil rights activists relied on informal networks to share information, Baldwin uses this journey to pass down knowledge, perspectives, and warnings about the fight for justice. He also kind of demythologizes it. He notes that it's not as glorious as some people would have you believe. And again, that could be potentially uh, a point of disagreement with this documentary, but it is sort of a necessary perspective for people to be exposed to. The idea that you're not going to necessarily be regarded as a hero by everybody. In fact, every little misstep you can make is going to be judged and poked and prodded, and that's pretty much regardless of what your actual intentions are. You could have the most honorable intentions in the world, and some people will still accuse you of doing the wrong thing. Just because you're, I guess, being less than ideal or whatever. That's one of the downsides to participating in human affairs, I suppose you might say. But that one of the main points here is that the fight for justice is unfinished business. You know, Throughout the film, Baldwin raises a critical question. Have the promises of the civil rights movement been fulfilled? And by 1982, when the film was released, the American South had changed in many ways, yet systemic racism and inequality persisted. And this is dealt with in some specific scenes in the film, but also it's just sort of a general thematic backdrop, if you will, that sort of it almost kind of propels the film along in a way. You you get the sense that even though the film isn't quite as action packed as like a Hollywood documentary, you still get the sense that history is a moving thing, and that there's a reason for the expression: the more things change, the more they stay the same. And it's really a thing that's kind of hard to define, but I think this movie kind of gets at the heart of it in many ways. Baldwin's powerful words resonate even today. Recall that he said that to be black and conscious in America is to be in a constant state of rage. And Baldwin's reflections are not just historical observations, they are basically like a call to action, a reminder that injustice did not end with the marches of the 1960s, and in fact, they'll probably never truly end. So it's about connecting the past to the present and connecting the present to us. So Baldwin's exploration in this movie serves as a bridge between the past struggles and, you could say, the modern movements that exist today, such as they are. The themes he discusses, like systemic racism, voter suppression, police brutality, they remain at the forefront of American discourse today. So again, I don't want to say that nothing has changed, but it's it's pretty disgusting that we really have to talk about the same issues that we were talking about all those years ago. And there's scarcely an issue from that era that couldn't easily creep back into the mainstream policy narrative. That's like the prescriptions would be shockingly similar. They might just be presented in a different way by the oppressive powers that be, you might say. So, like right now, one of the spooky words is DEI, which is really just another way of saying a business should be able to discriminate freely against anyone they want. Of course, hidden away in that messaging is sort of the dark truth that if these businesses were themselves discriminated against, they wouldn't like it. if there were policies that were jeopardizing their profits and stuff like that, if the workers were demanding too many, you know, rights or what have you, and better treatment, well, then these businesses, they just would be singing a different tune about, the right to face challenges, to face hardship, because the right to profit is really the superior right, and the god that America worships is actually the almighty dollar. So this is why films like 13th, which was released in 2016, which explores the prison industrial complex, and I Am Not Your Negro, which came out in 2016, and that examines Baldwin's unfinished work on race in America. Well, films like that are still relevant today. These documentaries demonstrate how oppression has evolved but never disappeared. It's just at times changed its appearance. So, Baldwin was fearless in addressing controversial topics like racism, sexuality, and power dynamics. His 1956 novel, Giovanni's Room, tackled themes of homosexuality and bisexuality at a time when such discussions were taboo. His ability to challenge norms and for society to confront its biases made him an essential literary and social figure. And there's a reason he should be, you know, taught to each generation. And unfortunately, I have to say that I don't recall ever reading any of his books. So I'm just I'm kind of cheating in a way here by you know relaying this information when I myself have not actually read something by James Baldwin other than, a portion or two from this or that work. But nevertheless, it's a it's an author you should check out. One of the key takeaways from I Heard It Through the Grapevine is the importance of passing down knowledge. As Baldwin reflects on history, he emphasizes a need to educate young people about struggles, justice, and activism. As Dr. Martin Luther King once said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And, that seems to be one of the defining statements that really clarifies the whole point of solidarity. Like if somebody is going to go after someone else, there's nothing to stop them from turning right around and going after you. You know, that's part of why this solidarity is a valuable concept, because as I've noted on this very podcast, back in the well, I don't remember what exact decade it was, but possibly like the 1930s or something like that. There were attempts to actually go after Finnish American immigrants, and they were trying to say that the the Finnish people who were in Minnesota were actually Chinese. So they tried to get them deported under the Chinese Exclusion Act. And to me, that really demonstrates that if they're not going to go after one group, well, then they're going to go after somebody else. You know, that's not to say that one group is going to experience the same level of hardship necessarily. They won't necessarily experience the exact same, you know, treatment, but it's just a point about oppressive attitudes. If it's not going to target you, well, they're inevitably going to be targeting somebody. these bigots out there in society and the people who want power and who use it to divide people to attain even more power. So, the message of solidarity is as relevant today as it was back, during the civil rights era of the 1960s. We should continue teaching such lessons so future generations can learn from the past and build a more just and equitable world, which is, of course, what should have happened, you know, after World War II, really. People back then had ample opportunity to see the horrors of warfare and, class division and social stratification and the perils of hypernationalism and all of that stuff. But, this world still has to be rotten, I guess. So it's a cyclical thing in many ways. And I heard it through the grapevine is a pretty good documentary for understanding James Baldwin's legacy and the importance of civil rights. It reminds us that history is not just something to be remembered, it's really something to be reckoned with. And you should try to, sort of stare it down and understand it and recognize its evils. And you should also learn from those evils, and you might be able to better understand and ward off the evils that are ongoing and that could happen in the future. So, Baldwin's eloquence and passion basically demand that we ask ourselves, what progress have we truly made, and what must we do to continue the fight for justice? So that's about it. I feel like I'm on a soapbox here, and I feel like I'm a preacher or something, and that's not really exactly what I am. This is a movie review after all, so I don't want to seem like I'm just another person throwing around lofty words and not really doing anything. But if you do want to understand, you know, James Baldwin, this is definitely a way to do it. So thanks for joining me, in this little episode. And if you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a review. And I'm definitely looking to increase my YouTube audience and hopefully my Spotify audience as well, because those are really kind of lacking at the moment. And I, I guess I'll just leave it at that as far as that particular aspect goes. So until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep pushing for a better world. And if the world pushes you back, well, you're just going to have to report accurately on what happened and maybe fight back too, It's a very brutal exercise to live in a world like this at times. So hang in there and do what you can to make the world a little bit better.